So if everything goes according to plan, we've got about 1 year before the next Stormlight Archive book comes out, which is going to be Book 5, the final book and the first era of the Stormlight Archive. And understandably, ever since Rhythm of War came out in 2020, there has been a ton of speculation about what's going to go down in this book, to the extent that there are many theories out there that have their own names and rivalries and dedicated cult followings. The ending of Rhythm of War gives a lot of room for speculation about what's going to happen in the 5th book. It sets things up quite nicely for a final confrontation of sorts. Even though there's still going to be 5 books that come later, all evidence seems to indicate that this next book is going to wrap up a lot of things. Today, though, I don't want to talk about what I think is going to happen in Stormlight 5. Instead, I want to talk about what I hope is not going to happen, about some theories that I really personally don't like. And this is not me trying to take jabs at anyone here. I don't want to rain on anybody's parade if you're particularly attached to any of these theories. But there are just a lot of theories out there that I wanted to share my own 2 cents on, and feel free to let me know what you thought of these in the comments as well. Anyway, there are going to be spoilers for every single Stormlight Archive book that has been released so far up until Rhythm of War in this video. So, you're welcome to watch if you haven't read all the Stormlight Archive, but I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, without further ado, let's get talking about... So, in the prologue to the first Stormlight Archive book, The Way of Kings, Gavilar dies. He also does this in the prologue of every single other Stormlight Archive book. It's like a bad habit of his. He can't stop dying. However, there is some speculation that I have seen around that Gavilar is not in fact dead, and that he's still alive, and that potentially he's going to be the champion of Odium in Stormlight 5. Just a quick recap for those who don't remember. At the ending of Rhythm of War, Dalinar and Odium agreed to a championship of sorts, where each of them would choose a champion who would fight to the death at the top of Urithiru 10 days after the ending of Rhythm of War, and that is how the conclusion to the whole war between Odium and Dalinar and his allies is going to be decided, presumably. Now, there are some thematic reasons why it would make sense for Gavilar to be Odium's champion. If Dalinar chooses to be his own champion, then you would have Dalinar fighting Gavilar. That's pretty cool because we get to see how far each of these characters have come, and we get to see a direct conflict between the ideals each of them embody. It also makes more sense in some ways than some of the other theories that have been put forth about who Odium's champion will be, one of which I will talk about later. But the thing is, leaving aside all matters of character resurrections and how annoying these can be when they're not handled properly or when they're overused, I don't think it's thematically good for Gavilar to still be alive. Okay, so in the prologue to Stormlight 5, which Brandon Sanderson has released, which, sorry, I should have mentioned earlier that I'm also going to be talking about the prologue to Stormlight 5. We see that Gavilar is very different from the man we thought he was throughout the entirety of the book series. We had been led for a long time to assume that he was this noble figure who followed the Alethi ideals and had this very strong sense of virtue. But in the prologue to Stormlight 5, we instead see him from his own perspective as an arrogant, manipulative, and altogether rather stupid person. More than anything, what we see that he desires most is immortality, and he's willing to put down and double-cross his loved ones in pursuit of that goal. First of all, I just want to say that I think the way Sanderson sort of pulls the rug out under us in this whole Gavilar is a terrible person reveal is really clever and unique. And I love how we see hints of this aspect of his character in the earlier prologues, but how it doesn't come into full force until we finally get his own perspective on the events of that night. But more importantly, with respect to this theory, I think that the way in which Gavilar dies is so important to his character and is sort of the ultimate comeuppance. And having Gavilar be resurrected to become Odium's champion really undermines all of that. Gavilar thinks of himself as this master manipulator, but in the end, he dies rather pathetically, alone and at the hands of an assassin whose motives he can't even begin to understand. And this final moment where he's just dying, so confused about what's even going on, is just the perfect conclusion to his whole story. Tales about arrogant people who end up meeting their own demise faster as a result of their pursuit of greatness or immortality are as old as time for a reason. And I really think that's what Sanderson was going for with this prologue to Stormlight 5. It comes across so strongly, the irony and the patheticness of it, and I don't see Gavilar getting resurrected. I don't think it's gonna happen. Sorry, Gavilar, but you had it coming for you. Okay, let me put this as nicely as I possibly can. No. Look, I get it. People are worried that Kaladin is at the end of the 4th book in his 5-book arc and he still doesn't have a girlfriend. And so they're wondering, you know, who's that going to be? Is it going to be Leshwi? Is it going to be Lynn? Is it going to be, I don't know, Yasna? And so we just keep coming up with more and more absurd ideas, which is, I'm assuming, how this whole Silladin thing came about. I don't know how many people unironically think that Syl and Kaladin should be a couple, but I'm going to address this theory, if we can even call it that, seriously anyway, because it just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. Their relationship is already about as intimate as it can possibly be. Shipping Syl and Kaladin with each other would be like shipping Moraine and Lan together from the Wheel of Time. It's pointless, it feels forced, it feels like fan service, and it doesn't make sense for their characters. Their relationship isn't like that. It doesn't need to be like that, and that's okay. They can just be human and Sprin. They can have that bond, and that's enough. They don't need anything more. Look, to everybody out there who unironically ships Silladin, I just want to have a few words with you. Everybody else, you can just skip this section. I just want to talk directly to you all. You are better than this. I believe that you are better than this. I know you want Kaladin to find love. I know. But there are other things in life than just shipping fictional characters together when it makes no sense. Kaladin may never find love, and that's okay. There's only 1 book left in the series. He doesn't need to find love. He doesn't need to. That doesn't have to be a part of his story. But I believe that you can find love. I believe that there is hope for you. I believe that you can live a fulfilling life without needing to come up with the most inane, nonsensical ships in the entire history of fiction in order to find some sort of meaning. Reject this part of yourself. You are better than this. You are better than this. I trust you. Okay, so this one might be my most controversial take in this video because it's a really popular theory. And again, I'm not trying to take jabs at anyone here. I'm not trying to put anyone down for believing in this theory. I just think that it doesn't make a lot of sense, and here's why. Basically, the reason some people think Gavinor might be Odium's champion is because of a few death rattles that seem to hint at something like this happening. Specifically, there's one death rattle that reads, "I hold the suckling child in my hands, a knife at his throat, and know that all who live wish me to let the blade slip. Spill its blood upon the ground, over my hands, and with it, gain us further breath to draw." People interpret this theory as being from the perspective of Dalinar holding a knife at the hands of Gavinor and having to make a horrible, impossible decision whether or not to kill his nephew in order to save the entire world. I think the reasons people are drawn to this theory are because, A, it would be a good way of showing us how far Dalinar has come as a person, with his commitment to family being so strong that he might be willing to risk the fate of the entire world just to save the life of his nephew, and B, moral dilemmas like this are interesting. They can provide interesting conflict, they can help us see characters for who they truly are, and it could just be an interesting moral dilemma that would provide a shocking twist to this final confrontation between Odium and Dalinar. Here's the thing with this idea, though. What's essentially happening with this scenario is Sanderson would be giving us a trolley problem. We have Dalinar deciding whether or not it's worth it to kill his nephew in order to save the lives of, I don't know, millions, billions, who's to say? Essentially, this would mean that the entire conflict of the Stormlight Archive comes down to utilitarianism versus deontological ethics. And I just don't see that happening. For one thing, I don't think that's what the Stormlight Archive is about. Some people interpret the phrase journey before destination, one of the first oaths of the Knights Radiant, as signifying that Knights Radiant should believe in deontological ethics, that you shouldn't be a consequentialist and willing to sacrifice people in order to save the lives of other people. But that's not how I interpret the phrase journey before destination. I think, and I think the books are pretty clear on this, that the phrase is more about accepting that journeys take a long time, that improving yourself as a person is a long process that takes forever, and it's a journey that you can only take one step at a time. In other words, I don't think it really has to do with consequentialist ethics. But furthermore, and perhaps more importantly, because we've all read books before and we've seen movies, I think what all of us would be expecting to happen here is for Dalinar to make the decision not to kill his nephew. But in real life, I don't think that's the right choice. I think this is a case where it's pretty clear that the right, albeit still very hard, answer to this problem is that you should kill Gavinor. Because, I mean, if Dalinar loses the championship, then he has to become a servant of Odium, which is going to entail him directly being responsible for the deaths of who knows how many people. It just doesn't make sense to say that not killing Gavinor is the right thing to do here. Now, obviously, in real life, moral dilemmas aren't usually so clear-cut as this. The reason consequentialism doesn't always work is because we don't know what the consequences of our actions are always going to be, and so we can't make perfect predictions about this. But here, Dalinar knows exactly what is going to happen if he kills Gavinor, and exactly what is going to happen if he doesn't kill Gavinor. It seems like there's a right answer here. And so the best we could get from this type of ending is to watch Dalinar have to make the heartbreaking decision to kill his own nephew in order to save the world, which would just, I mean, not be very fun, and it wouldn't really add anything to the story. It would just be sort of sad. Or we could watch him make the silly decision to not kill Gavinor and instead kill who knows how many people in the service of Odium, which is just silly and would be a real letdown for the entire series. Now, there are different variations of this theory, and as we have seen, all of the death rattles are true to some extent. So we know that at some point a suckling child is going to come into Stormlight 5, almost certainly. How that is going to happen, though, is anybody's guess, and I would love to hear your own thoughts on this. Do I even need to explain this one? Okay, fine, I will. Look, there are many similarities between Kaladin and Talanelat Elin. How do you Talanelat Elin? I don't know how to say his name. You know who I'm talking about. Both of them are extremely self-sacrificial and willing to do practically anything to save the lives of their loved ones. And so it sort of makes sense that Sanderson would be grooming Kaladin to take on a role similar to the role Taln took on for the past 4,500 years between Desolations, which is being tortured on Braze and refusing to break so as to prevent the Voidbringers from coming back to Roshar. There are some major problems with this idea, though. For one thing, it's hard to imagine the Oathpact being reforged in the same way it was before, because Odium doesn't need the Heralds to break in order to bring the Fused back to Roshar anymore. That is the role that the Everstorm now fulfills, and in fact Sanderson has confirmed that Taln did not break, he never broke. He didn't need to break in order for Odium to bring the true desolation to Roshar. But even if the Everstorm stopped all of a sudden and the Oathpact was able to be reforged, there's another problem with this theory, which is that it's just too dark. The thing with the whole concept of the Braze torture is that it only really works in a Cosmere book if you don't show it, because Sanderson doesn't do extreme levels of violence in his books. He's not going to depict Kaladin having his eyes gouged out again and again by flaming hot scalpels. During the Taln chapter in Words of Radiance, we get implications of the sort of things that Taln suffered on Braze for 4,500 years, but it's really only that, it's implications. Having our beloved main character endure the same sort of affliction that Taln went through on Braze, and having that actually be described, and having that be the ending to his entire character arc and the ending to this era of the Stormlight Archive, that's just a lot, man. That's a lot. That's not to say I don't love a good dark ending. In fact, I love dark endings, but that is just not something I see happening in a Cosmere book. I think that there are going to be a lot of unresolved things in Stormlight 5. I think that there are going to be a lot of threads left dangling and a lot of dark elements even to the ending. But I just can't see this happening. I don't know. Prove me wrong, Sanderson. Or actually, please don't prove me wrong. Don't make this happen, Sanderson. So those are the theories I wanted to talk about today. Please let me know what you thought of these. I would love to get a discussion going about some of these because I think they're pretty interesting, and you know, as I said at the beginning of this video, there is a lot of back and forth about what's going to happen in this next book, and it's really fun to talk about it. It's really fun to speculate. Also, let me know what your least favorite Stormlight 5 theories are. I would love to know if there's anything out there that's even worse than anything I mentioned in this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay generic.